In 2132, space travel is as common as catching a bus, and Ambercop sends ships to mine planets and capture alien critters to use as food back on Earth. There's also this legend about white space, a magical place with no disease or suffering. But no one's ever gotten there because it's guarded by a giant beast called Tin Lung. One day, two space hunters, Bentley and Hawthorne, find Tin Lung. Bentley shoots at it, but Tin Lung's mate blocks the shot. Hawthorne, in a fancy suit, aims for her weak spot and kills her. Big mistake. Tin Lung gets furious, chases Hawthorne, and smashes Bentley's ship, blowing it up. Flash forward 24 years, and Bentley's son Richard is now wheeling and dealing with a shady businessman who keeps a creepy bug in a jar. The businessman has a map showing Tin Lung's locations and offers big bucks for the beast's body. Things go sideways fast. The guard accuses Richard of snitching, grabs him, and the businessman tries to stick the creepy bug in Richard's ear. Richard fights back with a fork, a vase, and his fists. After a chaotic brawl, he shoves the businessman into the bug, which crawls into his nose, grabs the map, and runs for it. Outside, Lynn, an agent for the Interstellar Conservation Enforcement ICE, has been watching. She leaves quietly. 3 months later, Lynn goes undercover on the spaceship Essex as a mining and fishing escort, whatever that means. Her records are wiped clean, but her real mission is to protect Tin Lung. Surprise, surprise. Richard is the captain of the ship. His brother Owen gives Lynn a tour, introducing her to the quirky crew. Batali, the cook, Harpo, Batali's boyfriend, who's cheating on her with the pilot, Ragsland, and an old, drunken Hawthorne. Later, during a hunting trip for alien fish called clickers, Owen ignores orders, chases a big one into an asteroid, and gets knocked out by a bright light. Tin Lung shows up, and Owen shoots a tracker onto it before the crew hauls him back. Tin Lung disappears into the light, leaving everyone stunned. Over dinner, Lynn shares a theory that white space is real and could be reached by following Tin Lung. The crew laughs it off as a fairy tale, but she suggests the tracker could lead to more fish. Richard shuts her down, saying it's time to head home. Secretly, Harpo tries to convince Richard to go after the big load, but Richard insists they'll drop Lynn off first. Meanwhile, Lynn sneaks into the comms room to send a message to ICE, unaware her transmission gets intercepted. Later, Richard reminisces about his dad, gifting him a sword, and gets interrupted by Ragsland, who spots 2 small, unidentified ships approaching. Trouble's brewing, but hey, it's all in a day's work for space adventurers. Richard tells everyone to hide weapons and stash Ragsland and Batali in a secret compartment. Meanwhile, he places a tracker on the cargo, hoping to outsmart the pirates. Spoiler, it doesn't work. The pirates, bored, immediately start harassing Lynn, and even discover she's an ICE agent after a not-so-friendly frisk. They steal all the supplies and slap a tracker on the Essex before leaving. Furious, the crew blames Lynn, with Harpo locking her in her room. Things go from bad to worse as the crew realizes they're down to 2 bags of food and 0 plans. Richard proposes a crazy idea: hunt Tin Lung for a big payday. After some grumbling, the crew agrees. Meanwhile, Harpo's sneaking around with Ragsland again, but Batali finds evidence of their fling. Drama brewing. While this unfolds, Owen confronts Richard, accusing him of secretly following Tin Lung for revenge. Richard doesn't deny it, sparking even more tension. Then, ambergris, super valuable space goo, smacks. Richard thinks it's a trail left by Tin Lung. Owen thinks it's a trap. Either way, they go out in special suits to collect it. Enter the pirates. Again, they want the ambergris and fire on the crew. Harpo stubbornly stays outside to catch a giant clicker while Richard releases the waste chambers as a distraction. Harpo barely dodges them, but things get even grosser when tiny bugs from the clicker crate start biting Stubbs. The poor guy freaks out, runs to the bathroom to wash them off, and ends up hallucinating and screaming at walls. Later, Batali drops a bombshell. She's pregnant. Harpo panics about the cost of raising a kid and steals some ambergris, hiding it in the fridge. Meanwhile, Lynn escapes her room, only to find Harpo sneaking around breaking the ship's oxygen reserves. She confronts him, and thanks to her agent skills, easily takes him down, until Stubbs appears, screaming and distracting her long enough for Harpo to knock her out. When Lynn wakes up in the cargo bay, Harpo's already pinned the oxygen sabotage on her. Ragsland snoozes at her post and misses a mysterious signal on the scanner, while Richard ignores Lynn's objections to hunting Tin Lung. The crew discovers a graveyard of destroyed ships near them, presumably Tin Lung's handiwork. Meanwhile, in the vents, a deranged Stubbs carves soap with a knife because, why not? Chaos, betrayal, and space drama. What could possibly go wrong next? Richard figures out Harpo was the one messing with the oxygen. Hawthorne suggests maybe Richard let the pirates rob them as part of his Tin Lung obsession, but Richard brushes it off. Meanwhile, no one can find Stubbs. That's because Stubbs is busy being crazy and covered in bugs. In the cargo bay, Lynn is busy playing dodgeball with a loose clicker, yelling for help while hurling boxes at it. Richard hears the commotion, rescues her, and tries to fight the clicker with a fire extinguisher. Spoiler, it doesn't work. The clicker chases them down a corridor until Richard drops a crate on it, squashing it like an overgrown space roach. Owen refuses to lock Lynn up again, and he and Richard get into a shouting match. Owen accuses Richard of being as bad as their dad, who bailed on the family to chase Tin Lung. Richard responds by shoving him and storming off. Classic sibling bonding. Owen, annoyed, sends a distress call. Pirates intercepted again, because why not? Meanwhile, Harpo and Ragsland are at it again, plotting their escape while doing the naughty. Ragsland isn't sold on mutiny just yet. Suddenly, Tin Lung shows up, smacks the Essex, and damages the force field. Owen decides it's a great time to suit up and play space cowboy. He tries to bait Tin Lung toward an asteroid belt, but ends up crashing into an asteroid himself, bleeding everywhere. Tin Lung grabs Owen, smashes him into cosmic confetti, and vanishes into a bright light. Richard naturally just yells at everyone. Lynn shuts off Richard's weapon system to stop him from making things worse, and Richard thanks her with a good old punch to the face. Harpo, meanwhile, starts seriously considering mutiny, and even Ragsland seems to be on board now. Richard has a moody moment, saying he wanted to feel closer to his dad, but ended up losing his brother instead. Lynn convinces him to let her find Stubbs and help fix the oxygen if he agrees to keep hunting Tin Lung. Armed with Richard's sword, she sets off. Cue more chaos. The pirate ship finds them. Tin Lung shows up, and a storm looms ahead. The pirates shoot at Tin Lung, but he destroys both their ship and shuttle before vanishing again. The Essex limps into the storm with only 20% force field left, power failing, and the crew scrambling. Harpo tries to get Batali to join the mutiny for the sake of their baby. She reluctantly agrees, but doesn't trust Ragsland. Meanwhile, Richard fixes the ship's power just in time for Tin Lung to hurl the wrecked pirate ship at them. Ragsland kicks the thrusters into overdrive to avoid disaster. In the middle of all this madness, Lynn finally finds Stubbs in a dark corridor, covered in goo and ready to fight. Stubbs, now fully unhinged, gets into a sword fight with Lynn. She quickly slices off his hand, so he retreats to a tool closet to cauterize the wound with a torch. Meanwhile, Ragsland gets out of the shower and finds Stubbs' creepy carved soap. Before she can process this, Stubbs pops out of nowhere, pushes her into a locker, and stabs her. Ragsland officially has the worst bath day ever. Next, Stubbs heads to the kitchen and goes after Batali. She fights back with a pot, but Stubbs shrugs it off and corners her. Batali pleads for her life, even bringing up her baby, but Stubbs is too far gone and stabs her. Lynn shows up just in time to try to save the day, but gets kicked to the floor for her troubles. Luckily, Batali uses her last bit of strength to clobber Stubbs with the pot. While he's distracted, Lynn channels her inner action hero and decapitates him with Richard's sword. Sadly, Batali doesn't make it. Back in the cockpit, Richard and Hawthorne pick up Tin Lung's signal. Richard suits up to chase the beast, unknowingly dodging Harpo's plan to ambush him. Outside, Richard fires at Tin Lung to get its attention, and the giant space whale starts chasing him like a cosmic game of tag. He lures Tin Lung toward the ship, giving Hawthorne a perfect shot with the harpoon. Hawthorne nails it, locking the creature down, but the ship's AI starts screaming, "Abandoned ship!" As the crew scrambles to escape, Harpo tries to hijack the escape pod for himself and Ragsland. Hawthorne blocks him, and the two old-timers throw down. Despite his age, Hawthorne busts out some impressive moves, but Harpo still gets the upper hand. Just when things look grim, Hawthorne activates his suit's harpoon, skewering Harpo like a kebab. Meanwhile, outside, Richard refuses to give up the fight against Tin Lung. The beast, however, has other plans. It grabs Richard, crushes him like a tin can, and then flies straight into the Essex, blowing it to smithereens. In the chaos, Lynn remembers the fridge doubles as a cryopod because of course it does. She climbs inside, freezes herself, and gets ejected into space. As Tin Lung opens a white hole and vanishes, Lynn's frozen pod gets sucked in with it. A rescue ship finally shows up, answering Owen's earlier distress call. They find Hawthorne alive but shaken. As the Essex wreckage drifts into the void, we're left with one burning question. Did Lynn just become a popsicle in a parallel universe? Saves him. Evan realizes he's got one last shot to fix things. He travels back to the day he started writing his journals and tries to destroy the firework that caused the mailbox explosion. Things get wild when Andrea catches him with a knife, but Evan is determined. When he wakes up, nothing seems to have changed.